Have you ever looked at a map of Africa and wondered how a landscape so vast, so empty and so lifeless could once have been the cradle of something far older than the world dares to remember? Today, the Sahara Desert stretches endlessly across the northern span of the continent. It is a barren and unforgiving wasteland of dunes, scorched plains and silent horizons that devour the wind and swallow the sun. Yet, beneath this ocean of sand lies a secret buried deeper than the foundations of recorded history, ignored by textbooks and dismissed by scholars who fear where the evidence might lead. What if the Sahara was not always a desert? What if it once flourished as a paradise of rivers, lakes, forests and vibrant cities long before the first pyramids rose along the Nile? And more importantly, what if a lost civilization ruled this forgotten world until a cataclysm, remembered only in myths as the Great Flood, swept it away? To entertain such a thought is to challenge everything we believe about the origins of humanity. We are taught that civilization emerged around 6,000 years ago, that humanity's first great cities appeared in Mesopotamia, and that Egypt became the first monumental empire built from stone. But what if those stories are only the remnants of something far older? What if the people who walked the earth before these familiar cultures were not primitive wanderers, but the descendants of a forgotten age whose knowledge and power have been erased by time? The Sahara, as strange as it may seem, holds the answers. Satellite imagery now reveals patterns across its desolate surface, geometrical alignments, unnatural lines, and circular structures too perfect to be natural. These formations stretch for hundreds of miles, defying conventional geological explanations. Yet they are almost entirely absent from discussions in mainstream archaeology. Why? Because accepting them means admitting that history is incomplete, perhaps intentionally so. Long before the desert took shape, the region was a green world. Between 12,000 and 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was lush. Fertile plains stretched farther than the eye could see, teeming with wildlife, elephants, giraffes, hippopotamuses, and dotted with massive lakes. Rivers braided through valleys, feeding an ecosystem resembling the African savanna. It was a different Earth then, an age whose landscapes breathe through ancient rock paintings found in remote caves. These paintings do not show deserts. They show hunters, cattle herders, and boats, yes, boats, moving across waterways that no longer exist. One must ask, who were these people? Nomads could not have carved such permanence into stone. Something more organized, more capable, must have been here. If the Sahara was once green, then it was also livable, and wherever life thrives, civilization follows. In fact, the Sahara was not just livable, it was strategic. It stood at the crossroads of Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Such a location would have made it a perfect nexus for trade, culture, and innovation. Imagine vast cities built along riverbanks, adorned not with crude huts, but with stone constructions that rivaled the oldest known monuments. Imagine knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, and perhaps even spiritual, flowing through temples whose remains now lie under meters of sand. This is not fantasy, it is probability. Civilizations rise where resources are abundant. The Green Sahara was not a marginal environment, it was a paradise. If it remained green for thousands of years, how could humans, capable of so much elsewhere, fail to build something enduring here? The silence of history is not a lack of evidence, it is a void begging to be filled. Consider the legendary stories that echo across ancient cultures. Nearly every civilization on Earth preserves a memory of a flood, a cataclysm that wiped out an advanced race or an age of gods. The Mesopotamians spoke of a great deluge sent to cleanse the world. The Egyptians hinted at cycles of destruction and rebirth, overseen by divine rulers. Across the Atlantic, the Maya and Aztecs preserved myths of prior ages lost in disaster. Even the Bible recounts a flood that erased a wicked and powerful people. Why would such different cultures share a story so precise, unless it came from a real event burned into humanity's deepest memory? The timing is suspicious. Geological data confirms that around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago something dramatic happened. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a cosmic event sparked global climate chaos. Oceans rose, rain patterns shifted. The Sahara began its transformation from Eden into oblivion. Could this have been the moment when an ancient civilization met its end? A disaster not localized to one nation, but planetary in scope. If so, then the Sahara is not merely a desert, but a tomb. There are ruins, enigmatic, massive ruins, that seem to whisper this truth. Chief among them is the Risha structure, often called the Eye of the Sahara. From above, it resembles a colossal, concentric city, a design too symmetrical to ignore. Scientists claim it is geological in origin, yet even they cannot confidently explain its perfect rings. Some researchers suggest it may be the remains of Atlantis, the legendary island city described by Plato, a civilization with advanced knowledge erased by the gods. Atlantis was said to have circular walls of land and water, positioned near Africa and destroyed by floods. The similarities are uncomfortable. Could the Eye of the Sahara be the scar where history was rewritten? If this were merely coincidence, it might be dismissed. But the Sahara hides more. Megalithic structures, standing stones arranged with celestial precision, dot the landscape. Nabta Playa, a site older than Stonehenge, reveals knowledge of astronomy inexplicable for people supposedly just emerging from the Stone Age. Someone tracked the solstices here, someone who understood the heavens long before Egypt's pyramids aligned with Orion. Why would a pastoral culture invest such effort into this alignment unless they inherited or preserved knowledge far older than we assume? Even the Nile may hold secrets tied to this forgotten world. Its ancient course, different from what we know today, connected regions now swallowed by dunes. Egypt did not arise out of nothing. It may be the last surviving echo of something grander. As the Sahara dried out, its people might have fled toward the Nile Valley, bringing with them myths, skills, architecture, and the memory of a world consumed by catastrophe. Civilization, as we know it, may have been a second attempt at greatness, not the first. If we examine the evidence through this lens, the pieces begin to align too neatly to ignore. Consider the Sphinx at Giza. Geological studies suggest water erosion patterns on its body, implying it predates the desert and therefore predates the Egyptian civilization currently credited with building it. If true, then the Egyptians inherited something massive, monuments they did not fully understand. The Sahara's lost civilization could have been the architects, leaving stone markers for a future they could not imagine. Another clue lies in humanity's genetic history. Recent studies show that African populations exhibit ancient lineages, indicating that human civilizations might have risen and fallen there long before Sumer or Egypt. Yet, we lack the structures that should accompany such genetic depth. Or perhaps we do not lack them. They are just buried. Sand does not destroy stone. It hides it. What lies beneath could rewrite timelines, dethrone the earliest known cultures, and prove that humanity's first chapter is missing. This idea is not merely provocative, it is terrifying to institutions built on certainty. History is not just facts, it is identity, authority, and control. If a civilization older than Sumer, Egypt, or even Atlantis existed in the Sahara, then our current narrative collapses. It means that humans possessed knowledge earlier than believed. It means lost sciences, forgotten maps, and technologies that challenge linear progression. It means our ancestors were not ignorant primitives stumbling toward enlightenment, but fragments of something once whole. The Sahara's transformation from paradise to desert was not a slow decline. Evidence suggests sudden shifts, violent storms, and abrupt desertification. For a society dependent on rivers and lakes, such a collapse would be apocalyptic. Entire cities could have been abandoned within generations. Survivors might have migrated outward, carrying fragments of history like seeds scattered in the wind. Some arrived in the Nile Valley. Others may have reached the Levant, the Mediterranean, or even across oceans, an idea long mocked, but increasingly plausible as ancient maritime capabilities come to light. If such a diaspora occurred, traces of it would remain in myths, languages, and symbols. Look closely and you'll find that sun disks, serpents, winged deities, and sacred mountains appear across cultures separated by continents. Coincidence does not produce identical archetypes. Influence does. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this mystery lies not in what remains, but in what no longer does. The Sahara has swallowed untold tons of sediment and sand over millennia. What if beneath those sands lies not just an artifact here or a ruin there, but entire cities? Technology exists that can peer beneath deserts using radar and satellite imaging. Every year, more structures emerge, yet official responses remain muted. Why? Why are discoveries of ancient roads and foundations minimized? Why do academic institutions not launch vast expeditions? Are they afraid of what they might find, or afraid of what they cannot explain? The Sahara, once green and alive, now stands silent, yet its silence is deafening. Something happened here, something profound, something world-altering. History has been built upon the assumption that nothing significant could have arisen in a desert. But this desert was not always a desert. It was a kingdom, perhaps the first kingdom humanity ever knew, and its fall echoes across our oldest stories. So let us ask again, not as dreamers, but as investigators of truth. What if a lost civilization once ruled the Green Sahara before the Great Flood? And what if that flood was not just a myth, not just a religious tale, but a memory of a real event that erased the world as it once was? If the answer is yes, then the sands of the Sahara are not merely barren, they are sacred. They are the grave of a forgotten age. And what lies beneath them may not only change history, it may reveal that history as we know it has not even begun. If we are to uncover the truth hidden beneath the Sahara's shifting sands, we must begin with the fundamental question that lies at the heart of every lost civilization. How did it rise, and how did it fall? No culture emerges in isolation. Every civilization is born of necessity, shaped by geography, climate, and opportunity. The Sahara, when it was green, offered something extraordinary, a mosaic of ecological regions, all fueled by abundant water. Lakes the size of seas once shimmered beneath the African sky, nourished by rivers that carved through basalt and limestone. The wind carried the scent of fertile grasslands, not burning sand. Herds of cattle moved under the guidance of herders who traced the paths of celestial bodies with astonishing precision. This was not a land waiting to be discovered. It was a land already thriving. To understand what may have happened here, one must imagine human activity not as scattered tribes eking out survival, but as organized systems of trade, construction, and belief. There is evidence that the Sahara once supported a population far larger than what historians currently accept. The sheer number of rock art panels scattered across its ancient plateaus hints at prolonged occupation. Some depict rituals, others warfare, and many animals long extinct in the region. But perhaps the most enigmatic images are those showing what appear to be boats, oared vessels gliding across waters that should not have existed. These are not crude illustrations. They reveal proportions, hull shapes, and rigging details, suggesting a maritime tradition that predates the most ancient, river-based civilizations we acknowledge today. Why would a prehistoric people draw boats if they had never seen or used them? And why would they place such imagery far inland, thousands of kilometers from any known sea? Unless, of course, those places were once navigable waterways. Geological surveys confirm ancient riverbeds beneath the desert, their paths now fragmented beneath dunes. The largest of these, known as the Tamanrasset River, may have once flowed from the heart of the Sahara into the Atlantic Ocean, forming one of the greatest ancient river systems ever to exist. If so, then the Sahara was not merely green, it was connected to global routes, capable of supporting large-scale movement, trade, and cultural exchange. Civilizations do not flourish in isolation. They expand by mastering their environment, harnessing resources, and imposing order on nature. If a lost Saharan civilization existed, it would have needed infrastructure, cities, monuments, workshops, administrative centers. Where did they go? Stone endures. It does not vanish. Either the desert has buried these structures, or something far more dramatic occurred? The Great Flood myth becomes difficult to dismiss when examined against the backdrop of rapid sea level rise at the end of the last ice age. As glaciers melted, coastlines submerged, inland water systems overflowed, a sudden, devastating shift could have transformed paradise into wasteland in a matter of centuries, perhaps even decades. Imagine the terror as lakes expanded beyond their natural basins, drowning villages and fields. Imagine storms without end, thunder splitting the sky as temperatures plummeted abruptly during the Younger Dryas period. Crops would fail. Rivers would flood uncontrollably. The cultural heart of a thriving realm could be ravaged, and the survivors forced to flee. In such chaos, knowledge becomes a burden. Stories turn into legends, names become myths. But even in ruin, remnants persist. Nabta Playa is one such remnant. Nestled in southern Egypt near the modern Sudanese border, it stands as an archaeological anomaly. The site contains stone circles, alignments, and megaliths constructed long before the pyramids. These alignments correspond to solstitial points, and possibly Orion's belt, suggesting the builders possessed not just observational astronomy, but an inherited system of celestial measurement. Were these people refugees from a dying Saharan civilization? Did they carry fragments of a once great tradition, knowledge no longer tied to its homeland? Their silence speaks louder than words. Nobody erects such monuments without purpose. The investment of labour and precision implies institutional organisation, a priesthood, a ruling class, mathematicians, engineers. Yet these people left no written language, at least none we have found. Or perhaps their writings lie beneath sands we have not yet dared to penetrate. Satellites reveal anomalies, rectangles, platforms, geometric lines, hidden beneath dunes like the faint fingerprints of a vanished world. The Sahara is a graveyard of cities waiting to be rediscovered. It is here that we encounter the most unsettling idea. If this ancient civilization truly existed, it may not merely predate Egypt, Sumer, or the Indus Valley. It may have influenced them. Consider the sudden explosion of monumental architecture in Egypt. Civilization does not leap from mud huts to megalithic pyramids overnight. Something sparked that leap. Something catalyzed a knowledge transfer. Could this missing link be the Saharan refugees who brought with them the memory of a fallen age? Skeptics argue that humans could not have built advanced structures before recorded history, but this argument assumes that recorded history begins when writing appears, and that writing appears spontaneously. What if writing is not the beginning of civilization, but the remnant of a world already mature? Languages change, scripts evolve, oral traditions precede stone inscriptions by millennia. What we see carved in temples may be only the final chapters of a story whose first pages were lost in sand and salt water. The most compelling evidence for a Saharan origin of civilization lies in cultural parallels across vast regions. Ancient Egypt's reverence for cattle echoes Saharan rock paintings. The cosmology of cycles, creation, destruction, rebirth, appears wherever the memory of catastrophe persists. Even the architecture of early settlements in the Nile Valley shows traits incompatible with spontaneous development. Someone carried these ideas from somewhere else. Egypt may have been the inheritance, not the origin. And then we have the Eye of the Sahara. The Rishat structure, viewed from space, resembles a blueprint, a city unlike any other. Concentric circles etched into stone, nearly impervious to erosion. Geological forces may have played a role, yet the precision is uncanny. Plato's description of Atlantis mentions circular canals, defensive rings, and a city arranged like ripples in a pond. Though scholars dismiss it as coincidence, coincidences rarely align with myths preserved independently across cultures. If Plato recorded an echo of a real memory, a memory carried by survivors who fled catastrophe, then the Risha structure is not merely geological, it is a monument to a forgotten world. Some believe that this civilization possessed not just architectural knowledge, but sciences we seldom attribute to ancient peoples: astronomy, navigation, engineering, and possibly even mathematics that surpass what early agricultural societies should have known. It raises disturbing questions. Did humanity once possess knowledge that was lost, not discovered gradually? Is progress a cycle rather than a line? Were we once wiser than we are now? Human arrogance blinds us. We assume linear advancement because it flatters us to think we are the pinnacle of human existence. But archaeology whispers a different tale. Every new discovery seems to push history further back. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built over 11,000 years ago, shattered the belief that megaliths emerged after agriculture. It forced scholars to reconsider how people organized themselves long before cities appeared. And yet Göbekli Tepe is not unique. It may be a survivor, a refugee, of the same collapse that erased the Sahara's civilization. If societies with monumental architecture existed before the recognized birth of civilization, then the entire timeline collapses. Humanity becomes a species not learning to build, but relearning. Knowledge becomes cyclical. Civilizations rise, reach extraordinary heights, and fall into ruin when nature, or perhaps something else, reshapes the world. The Sahara may have been the first stage of this cycle, and the Great Flood the dividing line that erased its memory. But what kind of society was it? Was it ruled by kings who claimed divine authority? Did priests control calendars, ceremonies, and knowledge of the stars? Did they map constellations onto the earth, creating holy cities aligned with Orion, Sirius, and the Milky Way? Those who study ancient architecture note recurring alignments across civilizations: pyramids in Egypt, pyramids in Mesoamerica, stone circles across Africa and Europe. Why do so many cultures separate in time and geography mirror each other? Why do their gods look alike? Serpent beings, sky gods, figures with elongated heads or otherworldly forms. Shared memory rarely vanishes without a trace. It mutates into religion, legend, taboo. Perhaps the survivors carried fragments of a once unified belief system, adapted to new lands and new struggles. Over time, their descendants forgot the meaning behind the symbols, and rituals remained hollow shadows of once practical knowledge tied to agriculture, navigation, and celestial cycles necessary for survival. If the Sahara civilization was the first great culture, its collapse must have been traumatic enough to scar human consciousness. A flood would do that. Floods erase boundaries, wipe out records, and scatter populations. They do not merely destroy property, they shatter identity. A society that loses its homeland becomes nomadic, fragmented, mythic. Over generations, memories distort. Waters become divine punishment. Lost lands become paradise or sin. The past becomes a story told to frighten children under foreign skies. Yet some resist forgetting. Some guard knowledge. Every culture with flood, legends also possesses initiates, priests, shamans, scribes, who speak of times before the waters came. These guardians might be descendants of those who lived in the Sahara. They preserved names, symbols, numbers, and stories long after the cities vanished. Over millennia, their knowledge faded into esotericism. What once mapped stars now summons gods. What once regulated rivers now summons myths. We have been taught to see myths as lies, but myths are memories disguised as metaphors. If the Great Flood was real, and evidence across the world suggests it was, then humanity has been living in the shadow of a destroyed civilization for thousands of years, unaware of the inheritance beneath its feet. Could this lost society have been global? Not in the modern sense with satellites and engines, but connected through ocean currents, rivers and stars. Ancient mariners could travel astonishing distances using the night sky. If the Sahara's rivers reached the Atlantic, its people could have sailed westward, bringing knowledge to new lands. This possibility terrifies historians, for it suggests that the Americas were not isolated, that contact existed long before Columbus. It suggests humanity once viewed the world not as separate continents, but as a single, boundless realm. And if this was the case, then the Sahara was not just a region. It was the heart of early human civilization. Its fall reshaped the world, scattering humanity like embers from a dying fire. Each ember kindled a new flame somewhere else. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, the Indus Valley. These were not beginnings, they were restorations. The idea is unsettling not because it lacks evidence, but because accepting it means rewriting history. It means admitting that much of what we consider progress is rediscovery. It means acknowledging that humanity has forgotten more than it remembers. The Sahara once breathed. It once held rivers, cities, temples, and minds capable of marvels. Today, it appears dead. But deserts are not dead. They are dormant. They wait. And beneath the sand lies a truth older than time, a truth that will not remain buried forever. If we continue peeling back the layers of this forgotten world, a disturbing realization begins to form. The Sahara may not simply have hosted an early civilization. It may have hosted the first. The idea challenges every cornerstone of our accepted history. According to conventional chronology, humanity's intellectual dawn occurred after the last ice age, when small groups of hunter-gatherers gradually settled and began cultivating crops. Over thousands of years, these settlements evolved into towns, then cities, and eventually complex societies. Yet, this tidy narrative collapses the moment we acknowledge the archaeological anomalies scattered across prehistory, like breadcrumbs leading somewhere no one wants to go. The further we look into the Saharan past, the more the evidence suggests that humankind possessed sophisticated knowledge long before any recognized civilization appeared. The rock art alone defies explanation. It is far too widespread, detailed, and symbolically consistent to have been produced by nomadic herders living in isolation. Artistic traditions do not spontaneously emerge identical across vast distances. They require centralized authority, shared belief systems, and communication networks. The Sahara's ancient inhabitants were not wandering tribes. They were a people connected by culture, ritual, and purpose. Consider the paintings that depict beings wearing strange garments, elongated forms, and features that do not resemble ordinary humans. Some portray figures emerging from circular objects or descending from the sky, leading some researchers to speculate about extraterrestrial contact. While such theories venture into speculation, what matters is the presence of a worldview that cannot be dismissed as primitive fantasy. Something influenced these artists, something so profound that they felt compelled to immortalize it in stone. Whether symbolic or literal, these images testify to encounters unlike anything we understand today. More perplexing still are the artifacts that seem to belong nowhere within our current timeline. Tools fashioned with inexplicable precision, stones cut with angles too perfect for early humans, and mysterious engravings that hint at writing systems lost to time. Such objects suggest not merely survival, but intention, design, knowledge. Knowledge implies learning, teaching, institution. Institutions imply hierarchy, governance, and continuity. Where did this continuity come from if humanity had supposedly not yet reached that stage of development? The standard explanation is always the same: chance, coincidence, misinterpretation. But chance does not build megaliths. Coincidence does not align stones with constellations invisible to the naked eye during certain epochs. Misinterpretation does not explain repeating geometric patterns separated by continents. Something else is at play. If the Sahara was once the seat of the earliest civilization, its influence would not be confined to Africa. Its people, fleeing environmental devastation, would have spread far beyond their homeland, taking their knowledge with them. And this is exactly what we find. Across the ancient world, civilizations appear suddenly, not gradually. They emerge fully formed, with agricultural systems, architectural styles, religious beliefs, and astronomical knowledge already intact. Egypt, Sumer, and the Indus Valley do not look like beginnings. They look like continuations. They behave like societies rebuilding, not inventing. Egypt, in particular, raises unsettling questions. Its earliest monuments are the most advanced. The Great Pyramid at Giza is not the culmination of pyramid building, it is the starting point. Subsequent pyramids become smaller, simpler, and less precise. Why would a civilization begin with its pinnacle of achievement and then decline in skill? unless of course the knowledge used to build these structures did not originate with the Egyptians. If refugees from the Sahara arrived along the Nile, bringing remnants of their lost science, the pattern makes perfect sense. The Egyptians inherited greatness. They did not create it. Even the Nile itself appears to hold secrets related to the Sahara's lost world. Early settlements emerged along parts of the river aligned with ancient migration routes from the Sahara. Some scholars suggest that the first pharaohs were not merely local rulers, but descendants of an older elite displaced by climatic upheaval. Their crowns, symbols, and rituals echo Saharan motifs. The cattle cults that dominated early dynastic Egypt mirror the pastoral traditions depicted in Saharan rock art. It is as if Egypt was not born spontaneously, but reborn from the ashes of something older. This theme repeats across continents. The earliest structures in Mesopotamia, the ziggurats, mimic mountains, perhaps memories of a homeland marked by sacred hills or artificial platforms. The Sumerian kings claimed their rule extended tens of thousands of years into the past. Academics dismissed these numbers as myth, yet the Sumerians insisted they were records, not stories. Where did such precise astronomical and mathematical knowledge suddenly come from? Why did the Sumerians claim civilization was a gift from gods who came from distant lands after a great deluge? Is it metaphor or memory? If the Sahara housed such a people, then its collapse would be one of the most significant events in human history. But collapses rarely occur without precursor signs. What forces drove the transformation? Climate change alone cannot account for the scale. Something accelerated it, something abrupt. The Younger Dryas event remains the primary suspect, a sudden plunge in global temperatures followed by a rapid warming that melted ice sheets and flooded coastlines. But even this may be only part of the story. Some researchers propose an impact event, a comet or asteroid fragmenting upon entry and triggering shockwaves, fires, and atmospheric changes. Whether cosmic or terrestrial, the catastrophe appears to have struck with little warning. Imagine the despair of a society witnessing its rivers vanish, its farmlands turn to dust, and storms blacken the horizon for years at a time. Leaders would lose authority. Temples would crumble. People would abandon their cities in search of new lands. What once was empire would become legend. Over generations, the story of their fall would morph into a myth of divine judgment, of angry gods, of a flood sent to erase arrogance. The survivors, unable to reclaim their lost glory, would speak of their past not as history, but as myth, so that future generations could bear the weight of loss. What separates us from them? Time, nothing more. If our own civilization fell tomorrow, if our cities were swallowed by oceans or covered by volcanic ash, how long would it take for our memory to fade? 1,000 years? 10,000? 50,000? Would future humans assume they invented everything anew? Would they stumble upon our skyscrapers and assume they were the first to stack stones high? Would they find our inscriptions and call them nonsense? Or would they, like us, invent stories to explain what they could not understand? Perhaps the Sahara was humanity's first Atlantis. Not necessarily the Atlantis of Plato's account, but a world whose end was so traumatic that it fractured humanity's sense of continuity. Myths from every corner of the earth speak of golden ages, advanced beings, and great floods. These myths are not random. They share motifs: serpents, stars, divine knowledge, lost lands. They speak of cycles, periods of flourishing followed by destruction. Civilizations rise, master forces they barely comprehend, and fall when those forces rage beyond control. Some researchers suggest that the lost Saharan civilization may have understood celestial cycles, precession, solstices, and orbital mechanics. Their sacred architecture might have encoded astronomical knowledge that allowed them to anticipate environmental change. If so, their structures were not just temples, they were calendars carved in stone. As lush lands dried and skies darkened, these ancient astronomers may have predicted disaster but lacked the means to stop it. Their monuments would become warnings for a future that might never heed them. What if some of these warnings survive today? What if sacred numbers, ancient symbols, and obscure myths are not religious inventions but fragments of environmental data, mathematical constants, or cosmic alignments misunderstood by later cultures? If the Sahara civilization encoded knowledge in stone, it would explain why so many ancient sites are aligned with star systems. Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades appear repeatedly across cultures. Why? What drew humanity's earliest architects to the heavens? Were they longing for a lost home, or preparing for a future return? The Sahara may also explain why pyramids appear worldwide. Egypt, Sudan, Mesoamerica, China all built pyramids. The conventional explanation is coincidence, yet pyramids are neither the simplest nor the most obvious architectural form. Why then does the design proliferate across unrelated civilizations? Were they imitating something older? Were these structures copies of a Saharan original, built from memory rather than instruction? And if so, what purpose did the original serve? Tombs? Temples? Power centers? Or something entirely beyond our comprehension? If we accept that the Sahara once housed the first civilization, then the pyramids of the world become reflections, not inventions. Each is a distorted mirror of a forgotten prototype, built to reclaim a fragment of what was lost. Architecture becomes archaeology of the mind, a record of yearning rather than invention. But the sands still hold their secrets. Beneath them lie answers waiting for those willing to ask forbidden questions. Radar scans reveal buried lines and rectilinear patterns stretching for miles. These anomalies could be walls, roads, canals, anything indicative of complex urban design. Yet few excavations take place. Funding disappears. Permissions are denied. Researchers who raise uncomfortable questions face ridicule or silence. It is as if the past is protected, not by mystery, but by fear. What truth could be so dangerous that it must remain buried? Perhaps the danger lies not in the facts themselves, but in the implications. If humans built advanced civilizations before the recognized dawn of history, then our understanding of ourselves changes. We become a species with amnesia. Our myths cease to be bedtime stories. They become testimonies. Our religions transform from belief into memory. Our science becomes rediscovery, not invention. And once we accept this, we must confront a final, disquieting possibility. If civilizations have risen and fallen before, they will do so again. The Sahara may not be the only graveyard. It may be the first of many. Humanity may be walking along a cycle older than any nation, older than any scripture. If the Sahara held the first world, what came before the second? What age preceded ours? How much knowledge did we lose, and are we prepared to face the consequences of remembering? The desert does not answer. It waits. The Sahara's silence is not emptiness. It is concealment. Every grain of sand is a page torn from a story we were never meant to read. And as the dunes shift with the desert winds, occasionally a word, a sentence, or a symbol reveals itself, hinting at truths too vast to ignore. If we are to understand the forgotten civilization that may have once ruled this land, we must look not only at what remains, but at what refuses to disappear. For even after millennia of desolation, the Sahara still speaks. It speaks through ancient lake beds so large they could have supported entire maritime cultures. One such lake, known today as Lake Mega Chad, once rivaled modern seas in size. Its shores would have housed ports, settlements, and marketplaces bustling with life. The fish species that survive in scattered water pockets today are evolutionary relics from that lost era, genetic fingerprints of ecosystems that once thrived. These are not traces of nomadic survival. They are hallmarks of sedentary civilizations. A society capable of managing water on that scale would have developed irrigation, engineering, and organized labor. The remnants of canals detected under the sands, though not yet excavated, suggest deliberate manipulation of the landscape. Such work requires authority, governance, and knowledge. Civilizations do not construct waterways without reason. They do so to support agriculture, defense, and expansion. Whoever inhabited the Sahara was not primitive. They shaped their environment with purpose. Their purpose, however, may have extended far beyond food production or territorial dominance. Recent research reveals that many megalithic structures across Africa align with celestial phenomena. These alignments are too precise to be accidental. They imply that the builders possessed astronomical knowledge advanced enough to predict solstices, equinoxes, and stellar movements. Why would a people invest such energy into tracking the heavens unless their survival depended on it? Perhaps they believed the sky held truths about cycles of time, climate, or fate itself. If the Sahara's ancient people knew the cycles of the cosmos, they may have foreseen their own downfall. Imagine priests or astronomer kings watching the stars shift, recognizing celestial patterns that foretold disaster. Imagine temples doubling as observatories, sacred spaces where knowledge of the heavens guided earthly decisions. In such a world, religion and science would not be separate. They would be one. Knowledge would not be merely practical, it would be sacred. And when the signs came, when temperatures shifted, when storms grew more violent, when waters receded or surged, these leaders might have warned their people. But warnings do not stop floods. Predictions do not prevent catastrophe. As the land dried and resources dwindled, the civilization would fracture. The people would scatter. Some would carry their knowledge to new lands, while others would perish with their cities, entombed beneath sand. Still, fragments of their existence persisted. Symbols travelled far. Architectural techniques reappeared in foreign lands. Myths of golden ages and sudden destruction found homes in cultures around the world. These echoes did not survive by chance. They survived because they mattered. Perhaps the most enigmatic echoes lie in the global myth of the Great Flood. The Sumerians spoke of a deluge whose waters swept away a powerful civilization. The Egyptians described Zep Tepi, the first time when gods ruled before a devastating cataclysm reshaped the earth. The ancient Greeks wrote of Atlantis, a kingdom drowned beneath the sea. In India, Manu survived a flood sent to cleanse the world. In the Americas, the Maya, Inca, and Hopi all recorded floods that erased earlier ages. Even in remote Pacific islands, stories speak of civilizations destroyed by rising waters. How could so many cultures, separated by oceans and continents, share the same memory? Some historians dismiss these parallels as coincidence. But coincidence cannot produce identical narratives across disconnected civilizations. Shared trauma can. If the Sahara's collapse was the first domino in a global chain reaction, triggered by climate change and rising seas, then its fall would have been remembered not by one people, but by all who descended from them. The Great Flood was not merely a localized disaster, it was the psychological scar left by an extinction-level event. There is a chilling possibility buried within this idea. The Sahara may have been the heart of the world that was destroyed, not by divine wrath, but by nature itself, or perhaps by forces humanity could not control. Whatever happened, the survivors would have watched as rivers dried, forests became deserts, and the sky itself turned hostile. Their homeland, once a paradise, became a wasteland. The trauma would have been so overwhelming that their descendants encoded it into myth for tens of thousands of years. Myths, however, are not the only legacy. The landscape itself refuses to conform to the narrative of desolation. The Eye of the Sahara, from certain angles, resembles not merely geology but engineering. If it was once a city or ceremonial complex, then its destruction must have been violent enough to distort its purpose and erase its architecture. Yet its shape remained. Circular, symbolic, impossible to ignore. Even its proportions reflect mathematical relationships found in other ancient sites. If this was coincidence, then coincidence has become a conspiracy of stone. Other anomalies further strengthen this unsettling pattern. Deep beneath the desert lie fossils and remains of marine life, suggesting that parts of the region were submerged at some point in the past. Seas rose, lakes overflowed, and coastlines shifted. What if the Sahara did not die suddenly, but drowned before it dried? If a flood swept across its fertile plains, destroying settlements and displacing populations, then the drying desert was not the cause of the collapse, it was the aftermath. Such an event would explain why the world's earliest civilizations appear fully formed shortly after the Younger Dryas period. Their founders were not inventing civilization, they were continuing it, salvaging fragments of what they remembered. The sudden emergence of agriculture, architecture, and astronomy is not evidence of rapid development. It is evidence of rapid relocation. If we follow this line of reasoning, the Sahara becomes the missing link connecting numerous ancient cultures. A master civilization disperses under environmental stress. Its people scatter into Africa, the Near East, and beyond. Each group builds a new life, using whatever knowledge survived. Over centuries, these groups become distinct cultures, yet their origins remain shared. Their pyramids, gods, calendars, and symbols are reflections of a common ancestry. This leads us to an unsettling truth. If the Sahara housed the world's first great civilization, then our understanding of humanity's origin story is incomplete by design. History, as taught today, begins not where civilization began, but where civilization resumed. We are inheritors of fragments, pieces of a puzzle whose center lies buried beneath sand. Some may argue that we lack direct evidence, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when sand, erosion, and political disinterest ensure that evidence remains hidden. Civilizations are fragile. Stone survives, stories endure, knowledge persists, but time buries all things it cannot erase. The Sahara's transformation was not gradual, it was violent. Around 10,000 years ago, rain ceased, lakes evaporated, and monsoon patterns shifted so dramatically that entire ecosystems collapsed. If we imagine a civilization thriving under such conditions, then we must also imagine the panic that followed. Leaders may have attempted to preserve knowledge. They may have carved warnings into stone, knowing that their descendants would face similar cycles. They may have hidden relics or sealed archives in places now forgotten. This possibility opens a darker question. Could some of these archives still exist? Could there be chambers beneath dunes waiting for rediscovery? Could there be a library of the First World somewhere under the desert, holding secrets about humanity's origins, cosmic cycles, and past catastrophes? If such a vault exists, it would not merely rewrite history, it would redefine identity. We would no longer see ourselves as the authors of civilization, but as its inheritors. We would realize that progress is not linear, it is cyclical. Civilizations rise, fall, and forget. Humanity does not evolve from ignorance to wisdom, it oscillates between them. This cyclical model of history appears in ancient texts. The Maya spoke of previous worlds destroyed by water and fire. The Egyptians believed time moved in cycles called zep-tepi, epochs of creation followed by collapse. The Hindus described the universe as passing through yugas, ages of rising and declining consciousness. These traditions share a single idea. Humanity has lived before. Humanity has fallen before. Humanity will rise again. If the Sahara was the cradle of such an age, then we are living in its shadow, unaware that our greatest achievements may be pale reflections of something once far greater. And this ignorance is not harmless. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, not because history rhymes, but because cycles demand renewal. Perhaps this is why the desert feels alive. It is not a grave, it is a warning, a silent testament to what happens when nature turns against civilization. If we ignore its message, we risk becoming the next forgotten world, our monuments ground into dust, our stories reduced to myth, our existence questioned by archaeologists of a distant future. The sands are patient, they bury, they preserve, and sometimes they return what they once consumed, but only when the world is ready. To pursue the truth buried beneath the Sahara is to confront a paradox. The desert appears lifeless, yet it may be the birthplace of life as we understand civilization. The more we uncover, the more the boundary between myth and history blurs. It becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss ancient legends as fantasy when physical evidence, geological anomalies, and cultural parallels converge upon a single conclusion. Something significant happened in the Sahara, something large enough to imprint itself on the collective memory of humanity. Such significance is not born of small societies or wandering tribes. It originates from organized civilization, one capable of constructing monuments, developing complex belief systems, and understanding the stars. When we examine ancient myths more closely, we discover not only tales of gods and floods, but detailed descriptions of cities built with unimaginable skill. Egyptian texts describe a time when the gods ruled and departed suddenly after a world-changing event. Mesopotamian tablets mention eras when divine beings taught humans essential knowledge, agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, before vanishing. These stories are too consistent to be independent inventions. Either humanity collectively hallucinated the same narrative, or they inherited fragments of a shared, forgotten past. If the Sahara truly housed the first civilization, its people would have left traces that persisted across continents. Cultural diffusion alone cannot explain why far-flung societies developed similar architectural styles. Why do pyramidal structures appear in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific? Why do flood myths dominate every creation narrative? Why do so many ancient deities hold associations with water, serpents, or celestial beings descending from the sky? These motifs form a pattern, a tapestry woven from threads too precise to dismiss. One possibility is that, following the Sahara's collapse, its survivors dispersed across the globe, carrying remnants of their culture. Each group adapted these remnants to their new environments, resulting in distinct yet recognizably related traditions. Over generations, memories became myths, gods replaced ancestors, and practical knowledge turned into sacred ritual. Civilizations do not begin with ignorance, they begin with memory. And memory, when cut off from its source, becomes myth. Let us imagine the final years of the Saharan civilization. Scholars, rulers, and astronomer priests recognize the signs of impending catastrophe. Their measurements foretell climate collapse, droughts, and devastating floods. The lakes shrink, winds intensify, animals migrate toward regions once inhospitable. The people panic, but the leadership remains calm, not because they are indifferent, but because they have seen this before. Perhaps their ancestors recorded previous cycles in stone, warning that destruction was inevitable. Civilizations often view themselves as immortal. The idea that an empire can fall is unthinkable until it happens. When the end came for the Sahara, it may have arrived suddenly. Storms that lasted months, rivers that reversed course, skies darkened by volcanic ash or cosmic debris. Whatever the cause, the effect was absolute. Crops failed, populations dwindled, cities grew silent. Knowledge became a burden rather than a blessing. In such moments, desperate measures are taken. Some leaders would have chosen preservation. They may have created libraries, repositories of knowledge designed to survive catastrophe. Others might have constructed sanctuaries in regions they believed would escape destruction. Still others would have left entirely, abandoning their homeland in search of fertile land, promising to return one day. These refugees would have faced unimaginable hardship. They carried memories of cities that once gleamed under the Saharan sun, now lost forever. Yet they also carried knowledge. How to align structures with the stars, how to track celestial cycles, how to manipulate stone and metal. When they settled in new lands, this knowledge manifested in monuments built with inexplicable precision. Why do the earliest structures of Egypt, Peru, Turkey, and Mesopotamia display engineering sophistication that surpasses later constructions? Why do archaic temples exhibit astronomical alignments that later cultures could not replicate? The simplest answer is that the builders were not experimenting, they were remembering. Consider the Sphinx. Its body shows erosion patterns consistent with prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall that predates the desert. The Sahara was green when the Sphinx was carved. That alone implies a timeline far older than conventional chronologies allow. Either the Egyptians inherited a monument from an older civilization, or they built it as a memorial to a lost homeland whose climate was very different from the one they inherited. And what of the Rishat structure, the so-called Eye of the Sahara? Some researchers believe it was not a city but a blueprint, a cosmogram, mapping celestial or geological cycles. If the Sahara's inhabitants understood precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, they may have encoded this knowledge in architecture, ensuring it survived even after their own demise. Such encoding makes sense in a world haunted by cyclical destruction. If time moves not linearly but in loops, then only knowledge preserved in stone can survive the fall. The appearance of sacred numbers across ancient texts hints at this. The Egyptians, Sumerians, and Maya all revered specific values tied to astronomical cycles. Why would disparate cultures venerate numbers that describe celestial mechanics unless they inherited them? The further we venture into antiquity, the more we encounter mathematics without context. Equations carved into stone, numbers repeated in myths, symbols embedded in architecture. Knowledge without explanation is not invention. It is inheritance. If the Sahara was humanity's cradle, then its destruction was not merely environmental. It was existential. Entire identities vanished. Languages disappeared. Technologies once understood became mystical secrets. Craftsmen reduced to legend were elevated into gods. This transformation is visible in every ancient pantheon. Deities are not abstract concepts. They are echoes of real individuals whose deeds were magnified over time. The gods taught humanity how to build, farm, and measure the heavens. Did they truly descend from the sky? Or did they simply come from a land so advanced that later peoples mistook them for divine? To a tribe encountering refugees from a fallen civilization, armed with tools and knowledge beyond comprehension, the distinction between human and God would blur. This explanation fits neatly into the global flood narrative. A technologically advanced society collapses. Survivors scatter. Those with superior knowledge become rulers, priests, sages, or gods. They speak of their homeland with reverence, an Eden drowned or buried. They try to recreate what they lost, but scarcity, trauma, and time reduce their abilities. Successive generations forget more than they learn. Myth replaces memory. History, as we know it, begins only after this forgetting. In this light, the Sahara is not merely a desert, it is a boundary between worlds. On one side lies the memory of what humanity once was. On the other lies the story of what humanity became. We exist on the far shore of a flood that erased our past so completely that we no longer recognize the fragments when we find them. Yet the fragments persist. They fall from eroding cliffs. They emerge from wind-blown dunes. They reveal themselves in satellite images ignored by academia. They whisper from mythological texts, waiting for someone willing to listen without prejudice. And if we listen long enough, a chilling possibility emerges. The Sahara may not be unique. What if there were other civilizations equally advanced, each destroyed by their own cycle of catastrophe? What if humanity rises repeatedly, only to be humbled by forces beyond control? The Sahara may be the oldest grave, but not the only one. Under the Amazon's canopy lie ruins swallowed by jungle. Beneath the oceans lie cities drowned by rising seas. In Antarctica, beneath miles of ice, anomalies hint at structures too ancient to comprehend. Each forgotten world may have been part of a greater whole. Each collapse may have left survivors who seeded new civilizations, creating the illusion of independent invention. In truth, humanity may be far older than we dare imagine. We may not be the first iteration of intelligence on Earth, we may be the latest. The Sahara then becomes a mirror, reflecting both our origins and our destiny. It warns that climate is not passive. It shifts, evolves, destroys. Civilizations that believe themselves invincible are swallowed by dunes or drowned by tides. If the lost people of the Sahara understood this, they may have attempted to preserve not just knowledge, but wisdom. Their symbols might contain lessons encoded across millennia, waiting for us to decipher. Their monuments might be guides, not graves. The question is not whether a civilization once ruled the Green Sahara. The evidence is overwhelming. The true question is what that civilization knew, and why that knowledge did not survive. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it lies beneath sand, stone, or ice. Perhaps it lies within us, in instincts, dreams, and myths we dismiss as fantasy. Perhaps we're not discovering the past at all. Perhaps the past is remembering us. The desert winds do not speak, yet they carry echoes, and sometimes an echo contains more truth than a history book. To grasp the full magnitude of what may have transpired in the Sahara, we must consider not just the remnants of a vanished world, but the implications of a civilization advanced enough to alter landscapes, track the heavens, and transmit knowledge across generations. The deeper we journey into this hypothesis, the harder it becomes to cling to the conventional narrative that places the birth of civilization in the Nile Valley, Mesopotamia, or the Indus River. Those civilizations appear suddenly, as if awakened from slumber rather than born from trial and error. It is more plausible that they inherited the tail end of a far older legacy, one whose story begins and ends beneath Saharan sand. If this ancient society possessed knowledge beyond what we attribute to early humans, where did it come from? Did it arise naturally over millennia, through observation, experiment, and adaptation? Or did its founders, whoever they were, inherit wisdom from an even earlier epoch? There are those who speculate that humanity experienced multiple cycles of rise and fall, each time forgetting the lessons of the last. If so, then the Sahara was not the first cradle, but simply the last one we have not yet erased. The key to this puzzle may lie in the peculiar distribution of ancient symbols. Across continents, spirals, concentric circles, and celestial motifs appear again and again. These shapes are not random. The spiral represents cycles, astronomical, environmental, or spiritual. The concentric circle, like the Eye of the Sahara, may represent a city, a worldview, or a cosmology structured around layers of reality. Civilizations separated by oceans did not choose identical motifs by coincidence. Something unified them, whether memory or migration. Consider the notion of a first time, Zep-Tepi in Egyptian lore, Satya Yuga in Hindu cosmology, the Golden Age in Greek myth. Each tradition speaks of an age when gods or godlike beings lived among mortals, when knowledge flowed freely, when humanity existed in harmony with nature. These ages end not gradually, but catastrophically. Afterward, survivors struggle to reclaim even fragments of what was lost. Over time, memories distort. Gods become metaphors. Legends replace records. If the Sahara's civilization was part of this golden age, its collapse marked the boundary between myth and history. The world that followed was a diminished reflection of what came before. Humanity entered a period of recovery, rebuilding with remnants rather than innovations, guided by instinct rather than understanding. This hypothesis explains why technologies arise in abrupt surges. The agricultural revolution, the sudden emergence of writing, the inexplicable mastery of stonework all suggest rediscovery, not invention. Human beings did not learn these skills from scratch. They remembered, or more accurately, they reawakened. But memory is fragile. It decays when no longer linked to living practice. Symbols outlast language, but without context they become riddles. Monuments survive erosion, but without knowledge of their celestial alignments, they become tombs rather than tools. The Sahara's collapse severed the chain of continuity. Once the environment that sustained its civilization died, so did the infrastructure of knowledge. What remains today are fragments scattered across continents, like shards of a broken mirror reflecting a past we barely recognize. The question is no longer whether a civilization existed in the Sahara. It is what that civilization knew, and how much of that knowledge we have already unknowingly rediscovered, distorted, or ignored. One clue lies in the uncanny precision of ancient calendars. The Maya, Egyptians, Sumerians, and even prehistoric Europeans tracked astronomical cycles far more complex than necessary for basic agriculture. Their calendars align with precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. No practical reason exists for a primitive farmer to observe such a vast cycle, yet ancient cultures revered it. Why? Did they observe it independently, or did they inherit it? To track precession requires thousands of years of observation, or access to records spanning such time. if humanity had only recently developed writing, such observation would be impossible. Unless those records were older than writing itself, unless they originated in a civilization capable of documenting celestial movements long before its daughters arose. This brings us back to the Sahara. If its culture flourished when the desert was still green, it would have existed during a period when the night sky differed slightly from today's. Its priests might have tracked changes in stellar alignments, using them as markers of time, identity, or prophecy. Their monuments may have encoded the position of stars at key moments, preserving not just dates, but warnings about cyclical catastrophes. Imagine a civilization that understood not only its present but its future, a people who knew that climate change was inevitable, that rivers would fail, that the paradise they built would crumble. Such knowledge would shape everything: their architecture, religion, migration routes, and myths. It would compel them to leave messages for those who came after, hoping one day someone would decipher them. Have we already encountered these messages without recognizing them? The obsession of ancient cultures with Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades may not be arbitrary. These star systems appear repeatedly in myths as residences of gods, origins of knowledge, or destinations for the dead. If the Sahara's people encoded their cosmology into the sky, then later civilizations inherited not just astronomical data, but a worldview, one that placed humanity within a cosmic cycle rather than a linear progression. Modern science, ironically, is only now beginning to confirm what myths have suggested for millennia. Earth's climate, magnetic field, and orbital patterns follow cycles. Civilizations rise and fall not randomly, but rhythmically. Environmental stability creates flourishing societies. Instability destroys them. The Sahara's fate may be the most dramatic example. When the monsoon shifted south, the land dried, lakes evaporated, forests died, wildlife vanished, people left or perished. But imagine the psychological toll. For generations, humans accustomed to abundance watched their world disintegrate. To them, it must have felt like divine judgment. Their stories, passed through grief, became myths of gods abandoning humanity, of paradise lost, of floods sent to punish arrogance. Trauma carves itself into memory. Memory mutates into myth. Myth becomes scripture. The further we examine ancient stories, the more they resemble encoded history rather than fantasy. Floods, star teachers, sky gods, serpent guardians. These symbols recur not because humans share imaginative tendencies, but because they share ancestry. The Sahara was not one civilization among many. It was the source. If we accept this, then humanity is not young. Humanity is wounded. Much of what we call culture is scar tissue, an attempt to remember what was lost without understanding its origin. Our fascination with the past, our drive to build monuments, our myths of return and rebirth, all point toward a subconscious awareness that we have lived through ages before. Perhaps that awareness persists because some part of us, not written, not spoken, but embedded in our collective psyche, refuses to forget. The Sahara may be physically barren, but psychologically it is fertile. It hosts the seeds of questions we struggle to articulate. Why do we dream of golden ages? Why do we invent gods who teach us? Why do we fear floods, deserts, and stars that fall? These fears are not irrational. They are inherited. Every ancient catastrophe leaves a residue. The survivors who passed through the Sahara's collapse carried more than tools and stories. They carried a wound. That wound shaped the world. Egypt's pyramids were not monuments to pharaohs. They were resurrection machines, attempts to reclaim the lost world. Sumer's ziggurats were not temples to gods. They were stairways to memory. The Maya's calendars were not predictions. They were recognitions of cycles already lived. We are the latest generation of a species haunted by its own amnesia. The Sahara waits, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a truth to be remembered. When we understand its role in our story, we will realize something astonishing. We have not been rising for 6,000 years. We have been recovering. The first age ended long before the first word was written. The desert is its tomb, its monument, and its warning. If we fail to heed that warning, we may join it. If the Sahara truly represents the ruins of the first great human age, then the world that emerged after its fall did not begin with invention, but with reinvention. The civilizations we admire, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Mesoamerica, did not rise from nothing. They sprouted from the scattered seeds of a world that no longer exists, carried by refugees who remembered fragments of what once was. These fragments became symbols, rituals, and structures whose meanings diminished with every generation until only their forms remained, hollow echoes of the original knowledge they once held. What makes this realization so unsettling is not merely the age of the lost Saharan civilization, but the possibility that humanity once stood at a height of understanding we have yet to reach again. This civilization was not primitive. It did not stumble blindly toward complexity. It walked deliberately, guided by knowledge of the world and the cosmos. Its fall was not due to ignorance, it was due to catastrophe. A thriving society does not vanish without leaving a trace. Its memory transforms, mutates, and disperses, but it persists. The Sahara's memory is everywhere, etched into stone, carved into myth, embedded in languages, and visible in the patterns of settlement that followed its demise. What we mistake for independent invention is, in truth, independent remembrance. To see this clearly, we must examine what ancient cultures chose to preserve most diligently. They left monuments aligned to the stars. They encoded numbers linked to planetary cycles. They revered gods associated with floods, serpents, and skyborne knowledge. These traditions appear disconnected only because we have forgotten the original context. When viewed through the lens of a prior civilization, they become parts of a coherent whole. Take, for example, the serpent motif found across ancient cultures. The serpent is not merely a symbol of death, temptation, or chaos. In some traditions, it represents cycles, energy, or time itself. In others, it guards sacred knowledge. Serpent gods taught humanity agriculture, metallurgy, and writing. They arrived after floods, bearing gifts of civilization. Why would so many cultures invent the same myth unless they were describing the same memory? What if the serpent was not a creature but a metaphor? Perhaps for a river, a star constellation, or even the undulating movement of celestial cycles. The Saharan civilization, living in harmony with water and reliant on river systems, may have personified these forces. When their rivers dried or flooded catastrophically, the serpent became both creator and destroyer. Later cultures inherited these stories without understanding their origin, transforming them into religious myths. The sky. Gods are even more revealing. They are almost always depicted as descending from above, bringing laws, tools, and knowledge. In many traditions, they arrive during a crisis, save humanity from destruction, and then leave. They are not immortal beings in the supernatural sense. They are historical figures elevated to divinity. Survivors of the Sahara's collapse who reached less developed societies, possessing knowledge seemingly beyond mortal comprehension, would have been perceived as gods. Their technology, language, and memory of a fallen world would have seemed miraculous. Over time, their descendants forgot the truth and preserved only the story. Therein lies the great irony. Modern humans spend their lives searching for gods, unaware that the gods may have been us. But the strongest evidence of inheritance rather than invention lies in architecture. Monuments serve no practical purpose in survival-based societies. Yet ancient cultures invested immense labour in constructing megaliths, pyramids, and sacred enclosures. Why? Because they were not buildings. They were messages. They were memory anchors, designed to survive the collapse of language and culture. The earliest pyramids are the most advanced. The Great Pyramid is an enigma, a structure so precise that modern engineers still debate how it was built. Its alignment to true north is nearly perfect, deviating by mere fractions of a degree. Its proportions encode pi, phi, and relationships tied to Earth's circumference. Why would a tomb require such precision? It would not, unless its builders were preserving something more important than a ruler's remains. The pyramids are not monuments to death, they are monuments to knowledge, and knowledge was the currency of the Sahara. Consider Göbekli Tepe, a site far older than any known civilization, yet constructed with sophistication unparalleled in its era. It was intentionally buried before abandonment, as if its creators wished to protect something from destruction or judgment. What if Göbekli Tepe was built by survivors fleeing the Sahara, carrying with them rituals, symbols, and architectural methods from their lost homeland? If so, then Göbekli Tepe is not the beginning of civilization. It is the end of the prior one. This reframes our understanding of human history entirely. What we call prehistory is not a void. It is a veil. We have mistaken the silence of ruins for the absence of voices. But ruins do not speak until we learn to listen. The Sahara remains silent not because it has nothing to say, but because we do not yet speak its language. However, clues persist. The desert contains relics of pottery, tools, and carvings more complex than their supposed dates allow. Some show evidence of metallurgy, an impossibility according to academic timelines. Others contain astronomical markers that match star positions thousands of years older than their assigned age. Archaeologists dismiss these anomalies as errors, outliers, or coincidences because acknowledging them would require rewriting everything we think we know. Yet history does not care about comfort. It cares only about truth. The Sahara's truth may be that our story is not linear. We did not begin at zero and progress toward enlightenment. We fell from a height we barely comprehend, and we have been climbing ever since. Our greatest thinkers, Plato, Herodotus, Hesiod, believed that epochs of humanity rose and fell, each cycle ending in catastrophe. They did not propose these ideas as myths. They recorded them as history. Modern science, ironically, now supports this ancient worldview. Geological layers preserve evidence of sudden climate shifts, comet impacts, and mega floods. These events were global, not isolated, and they correspond eerily with the periods when civilization supposedly emerged from nothing. What if they did not emerge? They resurfaced. The Sahara's golden age may have been the pinnacle of human achievement. If so, we are not trailblazers, we are descendants of survivors. Our ingenuity is not new, it is inherited. The reason we rediscover patterns, principles, and technologies is because they are embedded in the human mind, waiting to be awakened. But this realization raises a question more troubling than any other. If we have risen and fallen before, what prevents us from falling again? The Sahara is not merely a monument to the past. It is a prophecy. It shows that nature does not negotiate. Civilizations depend on stability. A stability easily disrupted by shifts in climate, oceans, or cosmic events. When a world collapses, it doesn't matter how advanced it was. All that remains are ruins and myths. We are no different. We have built cities that shine brighter than any pyramid. We have mapped the stars, split atoms, and sent machines beyond our planet. But civilizations are not defined by their achievements. They are defined by their resilience. The Sahara teaches that achievement without resilience is illusion. A single shift in weather patterns could render entire regions uninhabitable. Rising seas could drown coastal cities. Storms could tear apart infrastructure. The collapse would not be recognized at first. People would cling to normalcy, convinced that progress is permanent. They would laugh at warnings, just as we laugh at myths. Then, one day, the laughter would stop. Future humans might stumble upon our ruins and ask who we were. They would marvel at our accomplishments and wonder why we fell. If their descendants found our myths, our stories of gods, floods, and lost ages, they might assume we were delusional, just as we assume of those who came before us, and so the cycle repeats, unless, of course, we break it. To break it, however, we must first understand it. Humanity cannot prevent a future collapse if it refuses to acknowledge prior ones. The Sahara holds the key, not because of what it was, but because of what it became. It is the memory of failure, written not in ink or stone, but in absence. Its emptiness is not void, it is testimony. It tells us that paradise can vanish. It tells us that wisdom can be lost. It tells us that the greatest threat to civilization is not ignorance, but forgetting. And above all, it warns, the sands remember, even when we do not. If the Sahara is a monument to memory, then those who seek its truth are archaeologists not of sand, but of time itself. Every hypothesis we explore, every myth we decode, and every anomaly we uncover pushes us closer to a realization that many will refuse to accept. Humanity's first chapter has been erased, not by accident, but by calamity, and perhaps, in the aftermath of that calamity, by choice. Imagine a society facing inevitable destruction. Its leaders know their cities will be buried, its rivers consumed, its knowledge scattered. In such a moment, the wisest among them might choose not to preserve everything, but only what must survive. Knowledge too dangerous, too powerful, or too sacred might be hidden forever, deemed unsuitable for a world unprepared to wield it. What if the Sahara's greatest secrets were not lost, but locked away? There is a recurring motif in ancient traditions: knowledge forbidden, guarded, or concealed. The Egyptians spoke of hidden halls beneath the Sphinx. The Greeks wrote of archives beneath the earth. The Hindu scriptures mention lost cities sunk into deserts and seas, their wisdom sealed from the unworthy. Even biblical texts hinted instruction withheld from humankind after the flood, restricted to a chosen few. Why would ancient peoples invent stories of hidden libraries, sealed vaults, and records protected by gods unless they were remembering something real? Human imagination tends toward embellishment, but not invention without cause. Myths are not born from emptiness, they are born from echoes. If the Sahara once housed the first civilization, it might have also held the first library, one not intended for public consumption, but for future guardians. What knowledge could have warranted such protection? Understanding celestial cycles, predictions of future cataclysms, the nature of human consciousness, or something even more profound, something that challenges our understanding of existence itself? We tend to think of ancient civilizations as materially focused, concerned with survival, food, war, and territory. But the myths that survive from the oldest times point toward something different. They speak not of mundane achievements, but of metaphysical questions, origins, destiny, and humanity's place within the cosmos. They portray the First Age not merely as technologically advanced, but spiritually advanced. This spiritual dimension is often dismissed today as superstition, yet it appears deeply woven into the earlier symbols. The eye, the circle, the serpent, the tree, all appear as bridges between worlds, metaphors for knowledge both practical and cosmic. These symbols were not designed for illiterate shepherds. They were intellectual frameworks, mental technologies, meant for people who understood duality, cycles, and transformation. Their meaning has eroded over thousands of years, yet their persistence suggests they once carried truths powerful enough to merit eternal preservation. But if this knowledge was preserved, where is it now? Some point to Egypt's Hall of Records, rumoured to lie beneath the Sphinx. Others claim fragments survive in esoteric traditions, mystery schools, hermetic texts, and oral lineages protected by hidden societies. Yet even these claim to be incomplete, shadows of something older. If there was a central archive, its location may still lie beneath the Sahara, in a place where no one thinks to look because no one believes it could exist. Modern instruments, ground-penetrating radar, drone surveys, satellite imaging, have detected anomalies beneath the dunes, rectilinear foundations, geometric mounds, and what appear to be subterranean voids. These discoveries are consistently downplayed or ignored by institutions afraid of rewriting history. Their silence may be fear disguised as skepticism, for what they fear is not merely the collapse of historical models, it is the collapse of identity. History is not just a record of the past, it is a boundary of possibility. If humanity existed before civilization, if we once possessed knowledge greater than our own, then progress is no longer ascent, it is recovery. The story changes from we are the first to we are not the last. That shift terrifies those who believe human history is linear and controlled. For if civilizations rise and fall cyclically, then no society is safe. Our achievements are not guarantees. They are temporary footholds on a mountain we have climbed before and fallen from. The Sahara's ancient people understood this. They lived at the mercy of cycles, watching climates shift and stars drift. They knew permanence was an illusion. Their monuments were not built to last forever. They were built to remain long enough. Their symbols were not carved for contemporaries. They were carved for survivors. What if we are those survivors? Humanity's myths contain a recurring expectation. The return of a golden age, the restoration of lost knowledge, the awakening of something forgotten. Every culture speaks of it in different terms. A new Zep Tepi, a new world after the flood, the return of the gods, the end of the Kali Yuga, the fifth sun. These narratives are not prophecy. They are memory projected forward. The past is trying to repeat itself, not metaphorically, but literally. If cycles govern civilizations, then we are nearing another turning point. Climate models show increased desertification across multiple continents. Seas rise, storms intensify, and regions once fertile face collapse. The pattern is familiar, eerie, undeniable. The same forces that consume the Sahara whisper at our doorstep. The question is not whether our world can fall. It is whether we will notice the signs before it does. This brings us to the heart of the Sahara's lesson. The ancient world did not die because it lacked intelligence or strength. It died because it believed itself immune. It assumed abundance was eternal. It dismissed warnings because disaster was unimaginable. Sound familiar? Our cities are built on coastlines. Our technology depends on stability. Our confidence rests on the assumption that progress is unstoppable. The Sahara laughs at such arrogance. It was once lush and alive, a world centre, and now it is a wasteland. If the first age could fall, so can ours. But there is another possibility, one far more hopeful. What if the Sahara did not merely fall into silence, but planted a seed for the future? What if the fragments of its knowledge were deliberately scattered, carried into myths and symbols, awaiting a time when humanity was ready to understand them again? Not all knowledge should be given freely. Some must be earned. A child given fire burns a house down. An adult taught patiently reshapes the world. Perhaps the Sahara's legacy is not a warning of doom, but a test. Perhaps it challenges us to rediscover what was lost, to rebuild not blindly, but consciously. The ancient world may have left us everything we need: maps in the stars, clues in the monuments, keys in the myths. The door has always been there. We have simply forgotten how to see it. Now, as technology illuminates what sand once concealed, we stand at the threshold. The past is resurfacing. The Sahara is awakening. Its dunes shift not like dust in the wind, but like pages turning in a book no one remembers writing. And if we dare to read, the story does not end with the Sahara. It begins there. If the Sahara is indeed the grave of humanity's forgotten beginning, then the world we know today stands not at the dawn of civilization, but in the long shadow cast by a far older age, whose memory has been scattered like sand in the wind. The greatest mysteries of our existence do not lie in distant galaxies or buried under miles of ocean. They lie beneath our feet, beneath our certainty, beneath the stories we've been taught to accept. What we call progress is not invention, but recollection. What we call history is not the beginning, but the aftermath. The Sahara forces us to confront the possibility that civilization did not emerge gradually, but re-emerged after catastrophe, like a tree growing from a stump whose roots run deeper than any eye can see. Across the boundaries of the desert, ancient rock art tells a story more sophisticated than any nomadic culture should have been able to produce. In Tassili Naja, figures painted in ochre and white float above the ground, their bodies adorned with garments and headdresses that resemble no known tribal attire. Some appear almost mechanical, others godlike. They are not crude depictions of daily life. They are records of encounters, rituals, and beings whose presence demanded memorialization. The scale alone is overwhelming, stretching across thousands of years and thousands of miles, unified not by chance but by culture. And surrounding these images are monuments aligned so precisely with stars and solstices that they must have served as calendars, observatories, or celestial archives. Knowledge for these people was not separate from the landscape. It was embedded into it. They carved it into stone because stone outlives memory. They measured the heavens not because they sought curiosity, but because their lives depended on understanding cycles that shaped the world itself. Yet this civilization left behind no writing recognizable to us, not because it lacked literacy, but because its scripts were spatial, symbolic, architectural. When the ecosystem collapsed and the people were forced to flee, the framework that gave meaning to these symbols disappeared, leaving behind signs without sentences, sentences without context, and stories that hardened into myth. Those who fled into the Nile Valley, Mesopotamia, and beyond carried fragments of what remained, but fragments decay. A refugee bearing knowledge of astronomy might be remembered as a sky god. A leader who once commanded cities might be remembered as a divine king. A technological device, misunderstood by its inheritors, might be remembered as a magical object. In this way, memory became mythology, and mythology became religion, and religion became the foundation of cultures that believed themselves original. The patterns, however, do not lie. All ancient civilizations claim that knowledge was given to them, not invented by them. The Anunnaki of Sumer bestow kingship. The Egyptian Negeru ruled before humans. The Apkallu teach agriculture and writing after a flood. The Virkushas arrive from the sea bearing wisdom. In every corner of the globe, the story is the same. Humanity did not rise alone. It was guided by beings who came from elsewhere after a great destruction. Whether these beings came from the heavens or from a drowned homeland matters less than the fact that the motif is universal. The academic explanation, coincidence, fails in the face of such consistency. Civilizations separated by oceans did not accidentally invent the same narrative, the same flood myth, the same celestial gods, the same architectural forms. Something unified them. Something happened. The Sahara is the missing piece, the pivot around which human memory turns. But what if even this civilization was not the first? What if it inherited knowledge from an earlier age drowned by seas long before the Sahara turned green? Submerged ruins off Japan, India, and the Mediterranean hint at construction predating accepted timelines by millennia. If they represent the remnants of a proto-civilization destroyed at the end of the Ice Age, then the Sahara was its successor, not its progenitor. This leads us to a staggering implication. History is layered like sediment. Each layer is a world, an epoch, a civilization. Each rises, flourishes, and falls. Each leaves behind echoes mistaken for beginnings. The Sahara was one such layer, immense, brilliant, doomed. When its rivers dried and its lakes vanished, its cities fell into silence. Knowledge became memory, memory became myth, myth became scripture, and scripture lost its meaning. We stand today not at the summit of human potential, but on the ruins of a forgotten ascent. Our cities, though vast, are fragile. Our technology, though powerful, is temporary. Our belief in permanence is an illusion. Civilizations do not end in fire, they end in absence. The Sahara did not die violently, it died slowly, imperceptibly, inevitably. 1 decade drier than the last, 1 harvest shorter than the year before, 1 migration farther than memory allowed. By the time those who remained realized what was happening, it was already too late. No wall can stop a desert. No monument can resist thirst. The greatest danger to any civilization is not war, hunger, or ignorance. It is forgetting. The Sahara did not collapse because its people were weak. It collapsed because its people believed their world eternal. We believe the same. We build skyscrapers on coasts that rising seas will reclaim. We store knowledge on fragile digital scaffolding that a single geomagnetic storm could erase. We treat history not as a warning, but as trivia. Yet the desert waits. It does not cry out. It does not accuse. It simply exists, an ocean of silence where a continent of life once stood. It is a monument to amnesia, a mirror showing us not what we were, but what we may become. For the Sahara teaches a lesson so simple and so terrifying that humanity refuses to learn it. Civilizations do not fall when they are weak. They fall when they are certain they cannot. The difference between us and the people of the Sahara is not intelligence, ingenuity, or ambition. The difference is time. Their sands were once our soil. Their fate may one day be ours, unless we remember what they forgot. Humanity has always believed that it stands at the beginning of its story, as though everything that came before was merely a wandering prelude to our age of industry, technology, and reason. Yet the sands of the Sahara whisper something profoundly different, something that unsettles the foundations of our self-perception. They tell us we are not the architects of civilization's dawn, but the custodians of its twilight. We are not the pioneers of knowledge, but the inheritors of fragments left behind by minds that stood before us, minds that understood truths we now struggle even to imagine. Those who once walked the Green Sahara lived not in ignorance, but in harmony with forces we have barely begun to comprehend. They studied the heavens because they recognized a truth we have forgotten, that the sky is not a backdrop but a clock. Its movements are not decoration, but warnings. Its stars are not distant fires, but markers of cycles that govern rise, fall, and rebirth. They measured the world not to rule it, but to remain aligned with it. They built monuments not to defy time, but to communicate through it. Their cities were not centers of commerce, but centers of continuity, designed to hold meaning in an age when meaning was as vital as water. Yet meaning dies when the world that sustains it dies. And so, when the Sahara's rivers vanished and the rains retreated, their knowledge lost its context. Their wisdom cracked like pottery left in the sun. Their cosmology fractured, leaving symbols carved in stone but severed from understanding. We uncovered those symbols thousands of years later and mistook them for superstition. What we call mythology is not imagination. It is memory decayed. Every flood myth is not metaphor. It is testimony. Every god who descends from the sky is not fantasy. It is lineage distorted. Every sacred number is not coincidence. It is legacy coded. But we, blinded by the arrogance of novelty, refuse to see. We divided history into neat compartments, convinced that what lies behind the written word is irrelevant. Yet the written word is not the beginning. It is the debris of a collapse. A species that truly stands at the dawn of its knowledge does not build pyramids aligned to the stars. It does not chart procession. It does not create stories of gods who once walked among men. Such stories do not arise from simplicity. They arise from loss. We call the survivors of the Sahara primitive. We call their descendants inventors of civilization. But invention is a myth we tell to avoid confronting the possibility that we are not advancing. We are recovering. And recovery is dangerous when it masquerades as ascent. If we believe our knowledge is new, we fail to ask the question that haunted the Saharan age. What happens when the world changes faster than belief? Their downfall was not sudden. It began with small changes, a shorter rainy season, a shifting river, an unfamiliar wind. The world did not end in a single day. It ended through 1,000 unnoticed adjustments, until one morning, the people looked out at their land and realized the paradise they depended upon no longer existed. By then it was too late. Civilizations do not collapse when they are weak. They collapse when they refuse to adapt. The Sahara teaches that certainty is the most dangerous illusion of all. In our world, certainty takes the form of data, power grids, satellites, and digital confidence. We believe that because we can measure the world, we control it. But measurement without wisdom is blindness disguised as sight. We have inherited the tools of the past without understanding the warnings embedded within them. We have taken the structure but forgotten the purpose. We can predict storms, yet ignore their meaning. We can map climate change, yet deny its trajectory. We can store knowledge, yet treat it as commodity rather than a responsibility. The first civilization forgot that water is not guaranteed. The next civilization forgot that memory is not eternal. We risk forgetting both. The Sahara did not vanish because its people were weak. It vanished because its people believed the world owed them stability. They mistook abundance for permanence. They believed that rivers would always flow, animals would always graze, and stars would always rise in familiar patterns. When the patterns shifted, they clung to identity rather than evolution. Their greatness became their anchor became their tomb. Our monuments are larger, our machines louder, our reach wider, but our assumptions are identical. We speak of growth as though it is inevitable. We speak of cities as though they are immortal. We speak of knowledge as though it cannot be lost. Yet every library is fragile. Every technology is temporary. Every civilization is mortal. The sands of the Sahara are not barren. They are eloquent. They are a grave that speaks. They tell us that the earth does not care who rules it. They tell us that nature is not an adversary but a judge. They tell us that the measure of a civilization is not how high it builds, but how humbly it remembers. Their silence is not absence, it is indictment. It asks us whether we will learn what they could not. It asks us whether we will ignore the signs already pressing against our borders, deserts expanding, waters rising, tempests growing, and seasons shifting out of rhythm. It asks us whether we will meet climate not with arrogance, but with awareness. It asks us whether we are prepared to understand that survival is not guaranteed, that continuity must be earned, and that the price of forgetting is extinction. But it also offers something else, an invitation. The Sahara is not merely a warning, it is a key. Beneath its sands may lie answers to questions we have not yet learned to ask. Knowledge not of how to build, but of why to build. Knowledge not of how to survive, but of how to endure. Knowledge not of where we came from, but of where we are going. If humanity chooses to uncover that knowledge, not to dominate, but to understand, then the Sahara may serve not as our past, but as our pivot. We stand now in a moment that mirrors the last green horizon of that ancient land. Our choices echo theirs. Our comfort blinds us as theirs blinded them. But unlike them, we have their story. We have their silence, their symbols, their warnings carved into time itself. The question is not whether a civilization once ruled the Green Sahara before the Great Flood. The question is whether we will repeat its fate or redeem its legacy. The sands do not demand devotion, they demand remembrance. They ask us to understand that greatness is not measured by what we build, but by what we preserve. They ask us to recognize that the true measure of intelligence is not invention, but reflection. If we can do this, if we can learn not just from our achievements, but from our erasures, then the Sahara's fall will not have been in vain. Humanity will not be the first species to forget its beginning, but it may yet become the first to remember its purpose. And should we succeed, the desert that once consumed a paradise will not be the symbol of our end. It will be the threshold of our awakening. For the story of the Sahara is not the story of a lost world. It is the story of a world waiting to be found. And the final truth it offers is this: civilizations that honor their past become eternal. Civilizations that ignore it become sand.